That chance took us to the Nashville Baptist Hospital in the early morning hours of Saturday, May 19th, 1979. June Carter Cash had come down to keep us company, and John was on his way. We were playing spades, laying the cards on Jesse's stomach. I hadn't been in the delivery room when any of my other kids were born. It wasn't done that way in West Texas. They didn't want any of those big, tough cowboys to faint away watching their wife give birth. But I almost did. It wasn't any different for me, though times had changed. You need to go in there, the doctor said, and so did June. But the closer the contractions came, the more I thought I should occupy myself by going getting me some cigarettes. I looked at Jessie, and you could almost feel the energy moving through her. It was like she had a whole sandstorm boiling up inside her. "Is there any way I can talk you out of this?" I asked her. She smiled and shook her head no. We were as totally together as a man and woman could be. "I'll go with you then." And I put the hospital garb on and sat there beside her in the delivery room holding her hand. We didn't know what the baby would be, a boy or a girl, right down to the last minute. There was a little red-headed boy that Jessie had seen in church. He was all over everything, pure boy spirit, and about the cutest thing you ever saw. His real name was Shooter. They put the baby on Jessie's stomach right where the ace of spades had been dealt about 10 hours earlier, and he was hollering to beat the band. Jessie looked over at him, and she looked at me and said, "We got us a little Shooter," as Waylon Albright Jennings promptly peed all over the nurses. "Well, do you want to go bankrupt?" Bill Robinson stood up and shrugged his shoulders and spread his hands. Richie looked forlorn. There wasn't much any of us could do. The figures didn't lie. I was swimming in red ink and about to go down for the third time. "You're broke," he said, laying it on the bottom line for me. "Everything you've got's in hock. Your building, your home, and the bank has closed your accounts. You've spent your advances. The worst thing is that I'd been giving it away. So much money was flowing through that office, I never bothered to count it. And after a while, nobody else did either, except to take out their share, and there were a lot of shares. I'd seen Bill Robinson backstage, on my way from the bus to the microphone, standing in the wings by the curtains when I'd work out on the West Coast. He was tall and gamey with a shock of black hair. He never said anything, and after a couple of times I began to recognize him. And finally I walked over one night and said, "What do you do? Have you got a job?" Maybe I'd hired him already. No, he just liked my music. And as a theatrical movie agent, with offices on Rodeo Drive, or as we call it in the country, Rodeo Drive, he was here as a fan. Bill became one of the brightest spots in my life. He represented Jim Garner, and as I got to know him better, I was able to confide in him about the growing financial mess that I was finding myself in. That fall, it had come to a screeching halt. Payroll was due, and the banks had stopped whatever money I'd had, and I tried to get a hold of Neil. He had disappeared, and don't ask me where. He had been supposed to get some money from somewhere. Don't ask me where. I was supposed to have been one of the top-earning entertainers of the 70s, and the money had vanished. Don't ask me where. Where? It was like I woke up from a deep, long sleep on the bus between towns, and for a second you look around and don't know where you are. Removed. And when you do realize, a sense of stepping outside yourself, seeing the whole map of where you've been and where you might be heading, then you really wake up and realize where you are. Up Shit Creek. It was Bill who told me how much trouble I was in. Creditors were beginning to send threatening letters. I owed $250,000 to Learjet alone. My American Express bill was the budget for a small state. I was giving the money away, literally. Salaries were overblown, padded out with rent-a-cars and party floors in hotels. A lot of it was buying friendship and approval, and a lot of it was people taking advantage. I got the leftovers. About this time, I hired an ex-IRS auditor to come in and go through my finances. He didn't look too happy when he finished unbalancing the books. "There's people you can put in jail for a long time," he said, "and they've stolen a lot of money from you. There's people right beside them who were not involved, but because they were there, they looked involved, and they'll have to go too." I knew what he was saying and who they were. but that had never been my intention. All I want to know is what happened, I said. I'm not prosecuting anybody. How could I? The main one who was involved was me, because I didn't care. Now, they could come to me with a problem, and I'd say, don't ask me, go see somebody else. Figure it out on your own. And after a while, no matter who they are, if they work for you, even if they love and respect you, they'll say, well, if he don't give a damn, why should I? I couldn't stand the thought of bankruptcy. There was no reason to hit bottom. I still had my drawing power. I could sing, play guitar, and lead a band, and write songs. I could work anywhere. Hell no, I told Bill and Richie in that October 1981. I won't go bankrupt. I have to find the hole and plug it, and then I can go make the money to pay it off. I shut it down. The office on 17th, a gala touring, and too many pals. Mary Lou Hyatt and Terry Lawrence, who came to work for me for 8 days and stayed 8 years, took what was left of the business affairs and moved it into the attic of Mary Lou's home. We couldn't afford to keep the office running. Besides, all the people that were coming to the door and knocking were people who had papers telling me I was being sued. We needed a place to figure out what was happening. Mary Lou had worked her way up through my organization. She had started in booking, overseeing our agency contracts and writers for our in-house agency, Utopia. She untangled the fan club and made sure that the newsletters and 800 telephone line were kept open, advising where and when we were playing. One day, all of these boxes arrived at the office. It was the papers of my music publishing company, Barron. Mary Lou took over the day-to-day running of Barron, which had Jesse's songs like I'm Not Lisa and Storms Never Last, and hits of mine like Are You Sure Hank Done It This Way. She understood the copyright law and publishing administration, and she took over issuing licenses and sub-publishing agreements and general clearances. I owed more than $2.5 million. Almost 80% of the creditors could have been paid off with $5,000. The bills that had been let go were so small. Some of them only amounted to $15 or $20 apiece. Everyone knew that we were fixing to go through hard times. Mary Lou contacted all the creditors and set up payment schedules. She gave me the option of working off the debt within a year or 2 years. I decided to go for the year plan. I immediately left for Las Vegas, where I could make $250,000 a week. I was determined not to let this one beat me down. The newly trimmed version of the Waylon Jennings Traveling Carnival Show hit the road. Slowly, show by show, and month by month, I put money aside for the debt. We kept out on the road during 1982, playing state fairs and honky-tonks and anywhere they'd have us. It was a vicious schedule, but we knew we had to work so many dates in order to meet the payment plans. Finally, a week before Thanksgiving, Mary Lou gathered the books and moved back into the office on 17th. It had taken a year to straighten things out, but everyone had been paid back. I was lucky. Sometimes you're in debt so far that you never have a chance to come out of it. I learned a lot of lessons and was helped by the fact that I could still work. Most country artists have been broke sometime in their career. I wasn't any different. You're out on the road, packing the places, the people are screaming, and you surely think everything's okay. It's hard for an artist to remain creative and still keep on top of the business. If you're too concerned with assets and liabilities, when are you going to write songs? Still, if you learn your lessons in the right place in your life, you just might profit from them. Ain't that right, Willie? The Widow's Walk is a four-sided rooftop balcony perched on top of an old southern house. In the Civil War, wives would go up there and wait, watching to catch a glimpse of the soldiers coming back from the front, their man hopefully returning from battle. For nearly 15 years, Jessie had kept that vigil. Jessie's was a forgiving heart. She had to have that sense of destiny working itself out, of time bringing even the most lost to their senses to live with me. It was past the point of husband and wife. She wasn't just trying to keep our marriage together. She was trying to keep me alive. The only normal thing about me was my home. I'd come in, my hair plastered all over my forehead, dripping wet with sweat, never without a cigarette. Haven't been up for days, and she'd trick me into going to sleep. She'd rub my feet, and I'd pass out on the living room couch. Sometimes I'd sleep for 10 minutes, sometimes for 2 days. She never gave up, and she didn't try to tell me what to do, but she didn't need to. I knew how I felt at home. I resented it because it felt normal and orderly. I felt unclean, like I shouldn't sit on the furniture. I might get it dirty, like I knew I was wrong. Jessie knew better than to give me ultimatums. She always wanted me to get off drugs because I wanted to, and not because she told me I had to. Someday, she thought, but she never told me outright to quit. It was hard for her to wait, but she knew in her spirit that the time would come when I would quit. Through her faith, she had a vision that I would be clean in 8 years, which meant that she started asking for my deliverance somewhere around 1976. Lord, her prayer used to go, watch over old Waylon, 'cause he's so dumb. We talked about it sometimes, but I could sidestep any conversation and avoid the subject whenever it got too close for comfort, outmaneuvering her. One thing I can always say is that even in my worst drug usage, I never was mean to Jessie. There's never a time that I didn't love her and she didn't know it. But I wouldn't allow her to talk about drugs. If she did, I would just tell her off real quick and go about my business. She kept poking vitamins down me. I really didn't believe I would live past 45. It was the romantic thing. We called it the Hank Williams syndrome. Along with roaring on old Hank's road to ruin, you were expected to die young.